Good evening. We are, as Rota Etü group, very pleased to have David Adams, the president of EGDF, this evening to talk about his experiences on guide dogs and the EGDF. Welcome, Adams. My name is Sarah.
My name is Ilayda.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. We are excited to hear about your valuable experiences and suggestions. Before starting to ask our questions, we would like to give brief information about ourselves. We, as Rota Etü, are students from Top University of Economics and Technology in Ankara, Turkey. Our group has been established within the scope of civic engagement course offered by Associate Professor Zeynep Güldem Ökem, a guide dog owner, and Associate Professor Hakkı Arda Tokat at the International Entrepreneurship Department at the beginning of 2020. In general, we aimed at raising awareness about social issues, providing to non-governmental organizations that are tackling with social problems, such as improving social inclusion for the disadvantaged groups. Our main focus currently is on supporting the Guide Dog Association of Turkey. Rota Etü's main contribution involved enhancing social awareness on guide dogs in Turkey, as well as assisting the Guide Dog Association in achieving their practical targets, including finding foster families and trainee puppies. And due to coronavirus, we maintain our activities through social media. We share information about guide dogs, the visual impaired, and related issues mainly by conducting interviews and meetings with various groups and people. As we said at the beginning, today we are having David Adams to learn his experience about guide dogs, the best practices and the activities of EGDF. Shall we start?
Yes, let's start. I'm really impressed to hear of your objectives and your endeavors. Excellent work.
Thank you. David, can you please talk a little bit about yourself? Maybe you can talk about interests, talents, and your job.
Okay, well, for many years, I could see. I've only been blind for about 10 years. And so I trained as an accountant. I worked for big companies, big global companies, mainly in the car industry with Ford and Chrysler and DeLorean, like the Back to the Future car. And when my eyesight started to really get bad, I set up my own company, and now I sell model cars for collectors, Ferraris and Rolls Royces and BMWs, and they're really nice. Formula One cars, a lot of Formula One. And that I run my own company, and that gives me the opportunity to do some charitable work when I want to do it. And so I became president of the European Guide Dog Federation in 2013, I think it was. Yeah, 2013. So 8 or 9 years ago.
What about your interests?
Oh, I like motor racing. I don't drive. Soccer, and I used to play football. I've done some marathon running for charities, and I spend a lot of time with my dog now.
Yeah, we know that you have guide dog, Zoe.
Yeah, well, Zoe was my first guide dog, and now I have a new guide dog called Jimbo.
Oh, yeah.
I sent you a picture of him. And Zoe was a girl dog, a bitch, and she was black. But my current guide dog is a bigger dog, and he is almost white, very, very light colored.
Oh, yeah, nice. My second question, shall we go?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Would you like to tell us how you come across the guide dog? How did you learn about them?
Well, in the UK, there are 5,000 guide dogs. It's a charity. All the costs are paid for by charitable donations, and in a year they have an income of about £100 million. So it's a very big organization, the biggest guide dog school in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And they have 5,000 guide dogs working in the UK at the moment. Now, if you have 5,000 guide dogs, you see them all the time. And if you raise £100 million to pay for them, you have a lot of, excuse me, a lot of visibility in the country. So they have a lot of time on television, on radio, and they even get on some media shows, and guide dogs are very much part of our life in the UK, which is why the organization is so successful.
Mm-hmm. We know that you have a guide dog, and you told us already. Your second guide dog. How would you like to say about a guide dog? How does he or she mean to you?
Well, it basically gives you confidence and independence. I go off every morning to my office with my guide dog. He takes me there. I don't have to ask anybody to take me. And I'm married. My wife is here. But if you're on your own, many blind people are older and live alone. And then if they have a guide dog, it's not just their independence, it's their companion as well, their friend, and somebody always there for them. So that's the same for me. He's my friend and my pal, and we have a good time together, and it's a very valuable addition to your life.
It's so nice.
Yeah, very nice.
Let's continue with the other question. We know that you have been actively participating in various charity organizations. You have organized big events and helped them to get considerable amounts of donations. How do you feel about these achievements? Could you share with us?
Yeah, well, one charity I was a member of was formed to save our school. It was a very small school. I live in a small village, and the local government decided to close the school. And we decided that it was a very valuable thing for the village that the children could go to school locally. So we started fundraising to raise money for it, and we had an auction at a ball we arranged, and we very progressively built it up. And the biggest ball we had, just one evening, and our village only has 500 people, but we raised nearly £100,000 in one evening, which meant we could pay the teachers, keep the school going at our own expense until the government decided they wanted it back. And so now it's back being a government school. But in other areas, I've helped to raise money for motor neuron disease. Do you know motor neuron disease? It's in America. In America, it's called Lou Gehrig's disease. But my son suffered from it, ALS. And before he died, he said he wanted to try to raise £1 million. And by the time he died, in 2 years, we raised £330,000. And now the project still goes on, and we've raised nearly £600,000 through all sorts of fundraising efforts. So these things, if you in the UK, fundraising is very much part of our lives to help charities and so on. So people are used to being asked, and they're very generous. So we've managed to raise a lot of money over the years for various projects. I ran the London Marathon in 2005 with my son, and I ran and raised money for 4 different charities: for the Royal National College for the Blind, for the guide dogs, for our local school, and for something else. Can't quite remember. I said college. So, as I say, there's a good spirit for fundraising in the UK. I don't know if you have the same in Turkey, but it's something you can work on. And it's a question of having good ideas, and they go for everything from a coffee meeting where people have a cup of coffee and pay £4 or £5 to the London Marathon, where 35,000 people run to raise millions and millions of pounds for all sorts of charities.
Can you give us some advice to raise awareness and get support for civic engagement activities?
Well, I think I read the thing you sent me about the postage stamps and various activities, and it's about communication. You can use your social media, but you have to make as many contacts as you can and try to engage with your politicians and everywhere. I think what you're doing is wonderful. So I'm really pleased to see it. And I think there's a good spirit abroad in Turkey for this. From what I can see on my visits to Turkey, I've seen an open-mindedness to the whole project. And I see Nerdin is working very hard to get publicity, and it's getting engaged with your, I don't know how in the UK we have lots of different levels of government, from the local parish to the county to the city to the government in London, you know, and so everybody you can engage with and show them how good the dogs are, how well they work, and what a big difference they make to people's lives. It's very important to get that civic engagement.
Now we would like to ask some institutional questions regarding European Guide Dog Federation.
Okay.
Can you please tell us about Europe Guide Dog Federation? What are the functions and the purpose of the federation?
I can indeed. We are represented in most countries in Europe. There are probably nearly 20,000 guide dogs across Europe, and the federation forms a link between all the guide dog schools and the user organizations. And the general idea is to help each other as much as we can to get better at what we do, about training the puppies and finding the puppies and helping the people with access to airlines so they can take their dog with them wherever they go, to get into shops and supermarkets. Because when I first came to Turkey, I went to the bazaar, the Grand Bazaar, and they wouldn't let me in, but I had a nice young man with me who was a lawyer at the university, who's studying to be a lawyer, and he spent a lot of time in the office, and eventually I was allowed to go into the bazaar with a dog. That was Zoe, and it might have been the first time a dog went in the Grand Bazaar. I don't know, you might know better than me. But I found, generally speaking, I could take my dog with me anywhere, but in some countries it's very difficult. I find it quite often it's hard to get a taxi with a dog. Not in the UK, because it's a criminal offence to refuse to take a dog in a taxi. But in some countries in Europe, it's quite difficult. So we try to help each other, to bring attention to these issues, to work with the institutions in Europe, in Brussels. We work hard with the European Disability Forum, and we try to make sure the Brussels politicians who make the European laws are fighting alongside us. So we are a campaigning organization as well from that point of view.
And would you please tell us about the process of becoming the president of European Guide Dog Federation?
Yes, I can. We have a famous college in England called the Royal National College for the Blind. And I was chairman of that for 10 years until 2013. And after 10 years, we have a rotation system, not like President Putin, who wants to be there forever. So after 10 years, you have to stand down. So I retired and I said, that's it, I've done my voluntary work. But a few months later, I got contact from the European Guide Dog Federation. They'd asked someone to help to find a new president. And they said, would you do it? And I said, not really, I've had enough. But they said, well, let's talk about it. So I went to London and we had a meeting with the trustees. There are 8 trustees from all over Europe, from Slovenia, Greece, France, Sweden, and various other countries. And we all met and they told me about it and I thought it sounded really great. I just got my first guide dog, Zoe. So I said, well, look, let me try it for 6 months, see if I like it and see if you like me. And after that, well, that was 8 years ago. So I'm still there.
And during your presidency, what would you consider as your or the federation's biggest achievement?
Well, I think we've united all the various countries, so they're all aware of each other. We have a conference every year or so, although we had to postpone it this year because of COVID. And at that conference, we have speakers who share their knowledge with all the delegates, but we also have the delegates networking together. And so the first time Nerdiners approached us to say, how do I start a guide dog operation in Turkey? I said, well, come to our conference, which is in Romania. And she came and met various people. She met Alan Brooks there, and everybody was able to help her and give her knowledge about how to start the guide dog school. And now you have guide dogs in Turkey, I'm delighted to say.
Impressive.
How do you manage your activities since coronavirus?
Can I say it again?
How do you manage your activities since coronavirus?
Well, with the coronavirus, we've had to embrace Zoom. We've all learned to use Zoom. We had to postpone our conference, and the guide dogs in the UK had to postpone all their activities. Since March, no dogs have been trained in the UK. So it's very difficult because the borders have the dogs at home and people can't go into the homes and meet each other, and it's all been very difficult, but it's slowly unwinding now, and slowly things are getting back into operation, and we're planning to have a conference in the spring of next year. So hopefully it will be behind us by the end of the year and we can resume. Go on.
We hope so. As far as we could find in the website, The European Guide Dog Federation currently has members from 24 countries. So, can you please tell us about your popularity of guide dogs among these members? In which countries the guide dogs are more popular?
Well, excuse me. The biggest countries for guide dogs are the UK, Spain, and France, and Germany, where guide dogs started. The newest countries are Turkey is definitely the newest country. Greece is not very long, and Romania. And there are some countries with very few or no guide dogs. Like, I don't know if you can see the map behind me, but we have a list of countries with guide dogs there. And so Serbia has very few guide dogs. Estonia, Latvia, the Baltic states, and the further east we go in Europe, the fewer guide dogs there are. So it's a new operation really in lots of those countries.
So do these countries have a special law on guide dogs? Can you inform us about how it works in practice?
Well, there are different models in different countries. In the UK, the money to run the guide dog operation is totally charitable. There's no government money whatsoever. In Spain, the blind people run the national lottery, so they get funded from the national lottery. And there are different models. In Germany, it's basically run through the health service. So people train the dogs, and the health service, if there's a blind person wants a dog, the health service tries to buy a dog from a trainer. So there are different models in different countries. I think in Greece it's almost totally voluntary, the same in Romania, but basically it's a little bit different everywhere. And if you can get some government money, that makes it a lot easier.
It's sad about the fewer activities among the countries. It's same in Turkey, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
Among the members of European Guide Dog Federation, which countries doesn't have such a law? How do you think using guide dogs could be widened in these countries?
Well, it's the law is different in every country as well. And even within countries, there are regions sometimes where the law is different. So, for example, in the UK, it's a criminal offence if a taxi driver refuses to let a guide dog into his taxi. It's a civil offence if a supermarket refuses to let a guide dog into the shop. And in every country in Europe, again, it's slightly different. I've been told by a German taxi I can't get in the taxi with my dog. Also the same in France, although it's a legal requirement to take a dog in France, it's not so strictly enforced. And the taxi driver gets a warning rather than a fine if you report him to the police. I think it's a criminal offence in Greece, but as I say, in some countries there are national laws. There's the Human Rights and the Equality Acts from Brussels that have been enforced across Europe, but they have to be legislated into law to make them practical. So it's a very mixed set of arrangements, sadly. But it's getting stronger all the time, and you have to put pressure on your politicians to look after disabled people's rights.
Yes. And my next question is, we know that some countries can make use of United Nations accessibility law. Do you think this law is really helpful in practice?
Yes, I do believe it is. It's guided the European Union's legislation, where they've made the anti-discrimination law and human rights law. And every country in Europe has adopted the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. That's been accepted by every country in Europe. And that's the first step to getting national laws locally. I don't know how it affects Turkey, or whether Turkey has acceded to that United Nations Convention, but it's a powerful weapon in lobbying your politicians to make laws to support persons with disabilities. So that's been adopted by every country in the European Union, even the UK, who's leaving the European Union.
We don't have a law in Turkey yet. We are trying for it. I hope we will manage it.
I hope so too, but remember, the law doesn't always come in one big lump. It can be a lot of little laws that slowly build up. In the UK, we've just had a law in the last 2 or 3 years that if a dog bites a guide dog, it's the equivalent to biting a human being. And you'd be surprised how often dogs on the street attack a guide dog, because it's got all the harness and things. Looks a bit strange to another dog. And there can be some violence on the streets, and that's always a bit worrying, where you go to places like Romania, where they have stray dogs, a lot of stray dogs on the street. And it's always, when you're with your guide dog, you can always be very nervous about walking among stray dogs that don't have an owner to be responsible for them. Same in Greece.
And I would like to learn about your the best practices, actually. I'm sorry. Which factors do you think are important to provide such a difficult and costly service?
What, of the guide dogs? Yeah, I mean, it is costly, because to do it effectively, you need to have, it's like running a company. You have to have all the practices and procedures in place to do it properly. So you have to have different departments, one to train the dogs, another one to do the fundraising, another one to look after the dog's health when they're trained, and to be inspected to make sure they're still prospering. So it's not just good enough to train a dog. You've got to have a whole series of procedures and processes to make sure the responsibilities for looking after the dog's health and well-being are very, very professionally carried out. Because if the public are helping to pay for the dogs, they want the dogs to be in good health and not suffer problems and be badly treated or by their owners or anything. Everything has to be done very professionally to high standards.
So can you tell us about the current situation of recently established school in Europe? And probably Turkey is among the latest. Is there any other country that has become a member recently? How they are doing? What's the function of European Guide Dog Federation for their progress?
Well, we don't have a formal responsibility. We have an advisory capacity, and we try to help wherever we can. So we introduce people. We've had people from Ireland, from Slovenia, from the UK come to Turkey to try to help build the knowledge base and the training, and to train the trainers. Because it's not only the dogs that have to be trained, the people who train the dogs have to be trained as well. So I know that somebody came to England, and we're always happy to invite people here to see best practice, to see how it's done. So it's a network of self-help group, if you like, everybody trying to help everybody else.
It's very nice.
Yeah, everybody's very generous with their help. So.
Now we would like to focus on Turkey-related questions. Upon the invitation of Guide Dog Association, you visited our country twice. First, we will be happy to hear your opinion about Turkey.
Well, it's a lot warmer than England, that's for sure. I only came to Istanbul, so I don't know about places farther afield, away from the capital, but
then what is your first impression about Istanbul?
Well, I was pleased to see that my dog was welcomed everywhere I went. I didn't have many problems. I did have problems, as I told you, getting into the bazaar. But while I was waiting for the negotiations to take place, standing at the entrance to the bazaar, many Turkish people just came up and said hello to the dog, hello to me, very, very polite. No,
we are happy to hear that.
Yeah, there were no problems, although as we went around, people were surprised to see a dog, especially when dogs have got a very good sense of smell. So when we got to the spice stores, his nose was twitching and they were a bit worried, I think. But they're very well trained guide dogs, so they don't ever cause a problem. They don't bite, they don't eat food off tables or stalls or anything, and they don't make a mess, except when you tell them to. So, but the people were very nice, and we even took him into some cafes and shops and different places, and we had a good welcome, a warm welcome. I'm glad to say.
Glad to hear that. And then how did you meet Nurdeniz Tuncer, the president of Guide Dog Association?
Well, she, I think, met the British ambassador's wife, Maggie Moore, and she asked her how, because Maggie is blind, and Nurdeniz asked her how she should proceed, and Maggie, being English, got in touch, and we invited Nurdeniz to our conference in Bucharest, and there she met many other people, and they were all giving her advice, and she met Alan Brooks, who came from England and has introduced other people, and she just became part of our network, of our friendship group, if you like, and everybody tried to help her.
It's good. And for the following questions, first we would like to talk a little bit about current situation in our country, then hear your thoughts. When you visited Turkey, you might have noticed it or not that having a pet, especially a dog, at home is not as common in our country as in the UK or in other European countries or in US. Culturally, we have not accustomed to grow up with a pet, especially in cities. having a dog as a pet at home has become popular for the past 10 to 15 years. But unfortunately, it is very common that some people leave their friends to shelters and even to the streets soon after having them because they find difficult to live with a dog. A fast-paced and unplanned urbanization can be considered as one of the reasons. In big cities, settlements are closely spaced and there are limited areas and parks to walk with a dog. People live in apartments. The houses with the gardens are usually outside the city center. As for the traffic rules, drivers are not quite attentive to pedestrians. As we have said already, unfortunately, there are many homeless dogs and cats in streets. Additionally, since the guide dog training is pretty new concept, the access to the public areas and shop with guide dog are very, very limited, and there's no regulation related to this. And despite all these factors, the situation is improving. And probably you have already knew we have 5 dog users, and they can go shopping malls and use public transport in Istanbul and the capital of Turkey, Ankara.
Yeah.
And having heard this background, can we hear your advices on how to increase the number of guide dog for the visually impaired in our country?
Well, I have to say it's not easy. It's a long journey, and it takes a lot of determination, which is why I'm so pleased to see your group engaging in this activity. It's not just Turkey that has cultural issues. In the UK, blind people don't have to be just culturally British or English or Christian. We have a big Muslim population, and we had a problem with a Muslim lady with a guide dog, and she couldn't take it to the mosque. And so it was the same situation you might find it elsewhere. But the guide dogs in the UK talked to the Muslim Council of Great Britain, and they eventually issued a fatwa so she could take her dog to the mosque. And she does that now. So she was delighted, although her mother was frightened of the dog when she first took it home. But again, after a little while, she realized the dog, some people say guide dogs are not dogs, they're more like humans. But it's a long journey, as I say, and I think you have to educate your population, your politicians. But at the guide dog school, they have to realize that the accommodation the dog ends up in has to be suitable for the dog, and that's all part of the process of placing a dog with a blind person. If you're on the top floor of a big apartment block, it may be okay, but if there's nowhere to take the dog to make pee-pee and poo-poo, you've got a big problem, you know. It has to do that. It's only a dog. And so all these things have to be assessed by the Guide Dog Association before they can give a guide dog. And I heard of one person who had a guide dog, but the mother was frightened of it and so wouldn't let it into the house, where a guide dog becomes part of the family, as I said earlier. So it has to be, it needs its friendship with the family as well. It becomes part of the family, and so that's down to the guide dog school to make sure the living place for the dog is suitable. And one thing you can do with your civic engagement is when somebody makes a park for the public to go, that there might be a little space for the dogs to go to exercise and to do their business, you know. And that's not difficult. If you have a big park, you can have a little space for the dogs fenced off. And it makes life so much better for everybody.
Mhm.
Thanks for sharing with us. And the other question is that, as you also know, the Guide Dog Association has only one guide dog trainer. What would you suggest to increase the number of guide dog trainers?
Well, the trainer has to be trained.
Yes, for sure.
And that can take more than a year, maybe 2 years. So I know that Nerden is in touch with various people around Europe who would be pleased to train a guide dog trainer, but it costs money, even if it's only airfares and hotels and accommodation. We have an association in Germany which is trying to establish a training regime for trainers so that there'll be a European qualification for guide dog trainers. And that work should be finished in the next year or two. And I'd be happy to put Nadine in touch with the lady. Her name is Rosie Wauder. She's in Germany. And hopefully within about 18 months, we will have a European qualification for guide dog trainers. And it means that people could come from another country to work in Turkey.
Mhm.
But there's a financial cost which has to be paid. So that money is always part of the formula, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's the problem, I think. And that's all our questions. Would you like to add anything?
Well, just to say in that context that a trainer is a man with a specific responsibility, and within the organization, he needs a framework of supervision so that it's not just him alone with the dog and the blind person, but that somebody is supervising his activity to make sure the standards are maintained. Because it's not just when the dog's trained, it's what happens after it's trained, annual inspection to make sure it's healthy. And when it retires, you can't just say goodbye to the dog and put it on the street. You need to give it a proper retirement home. And so that's all part of the process, which needs to be documented formally so that everybody knows it's a very humanitarian, if that's the right word for a dog, process, that it's protected and looked after for its whole life, not just while it's working.
Thanks for sharing your valuable experience with us. On behalf of Rota Etü and all our viewers, I would like to thank you for your time with us. It was a great pleasure to meet you, and having with such a successful background in civic engagement. We really appreciate your guidance. Thank you.
Well, I'm here all the time, so if you need anything else, please don't hesitate to contact me, and I wish you all the best. I'm really proud of the work you're doing in trying to help guide dogs in Turkey. Well done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.